Hello, and welcome to this week's Embody podcast with me, your host, Michelle Major. This week we have the incredible Barbara Scully from Dublin. Barbara is a writer and broadcaster and has authored a book called Wise Up, which I love the title of. um, Wisdom, Power, and the Older Woman. So, welcome, Barbara.
Thank you very much. It's lovely to join you, Michelle. Thank you for asking me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so what part of Dublin are you in? Because
I
Dublin's huge,
I
isn't
well, yeah, I'm on the south side of the city, in Dunleary, very near to Dunleary, so near the sea, and I'm still living where in the same area where I grew up. So I'm a
it?
proud Dunleary woman. Yeah,
Beautiful. That's really nice because that's a rarity now, isn't it? Because
it
usually
is.
people
And
move
in actual
away.
fact, I'm a second generation Dunleary woman because my mother grew up here as well. So that's even more unusual. So yeah, I'm very rooted, I think, in the place where I live. Every so often I dream about moving out maybe to the country a little bit or something like that. But I live about 2 kilometers. Actually, I live just over 2 kilometers because we went into the first lockdown. I was prevented from getting to the sea. So I'm
Oh,
about 2 kilometers from the coast, which I have to say, I couldn't imagine not living near the sea. And if you're going to live near the sea, and I kind of love Dublin as well, so yeah, I can't imagine really ever moving away.
hmm. Perfect. I'm the same. I'm exactly the same. I'm not far from the sea as well, and I love it. And in fact, my son he goes to school, in Portrush, overlooking
Oh, lovely.
West Strand Beach. So
Oh,
so they do a lot of like outdoor learning on the beach as well, which is fun.
oh,
Yeah.
sounds idyllic.
Yes. So I am with you 100% on that. Love the sea, love the ocean. So curious to know your background. I know the book Wise Up is in two parts, and
Mm,
part one is like a memoir, and then part two is, I suppose, your views, opinions on getting older in the
exactly.
culture and in the society that we live in. So first of all, what inspired you or motivated you to write this book?
A couple of things, I suppose. And number one is that I was I was very I had kind of conflicted feelings about the increasing conversation about menopause. And I'm delighted that we are talking about menopause because, if you are at my age, you will remember, growing up. I remember my mother talking to her friends in hushed tones about the change, as if it
Mm,
was some kind of horrendous thing that happened to women. And we didn't talk about the menopause in polite society in the same way as we didn't talk about periods. We didn't really talk about pregnancy or childbirth or anything like that. So I'm glad we are talking about menopause and it's come out of the shadows. But as somebody who has transitioned through the menopause, I am slightly kind of concerned that an awful lot of the conversation around menopause is entirely negative, focuses on the difficulties. And again, I know some women do have a lot of difficult things to contend with during menopause, absolutely. But I wanted to kind of make the point that not all women do.
yeah,
But I wanted to make the much bigger point is that, in my experience, and from talking to the women my age, I know I'm not alone. Once you get through the worst of menopause, once you hit kind of late 50s into your 60s, you actually enter into this amazing time in your life as a woman. And I really wanted to share that. I
mm,
really wanted to draw women's attention to that and to say, what's coming down the tracks is actually really amazing because women's lives unfold in a very different way than men's do, because of our biology. And
yeah,
I suppose, and that was why when I wrote the book, I felt I had to go back into my own story, and kind of tell, some of the things that happened to me. I mean, it's not a complete memoir, but the first part of the book, I break down into the adult decades of my life. So I talk about not all of, some of the kind of formative things that happened in each of those decades. And the reason I did that was twofold. Was number one, to illustrate how my life has been very ordinary in the same way as most women's lives are, but we have so much commonalities. And I think that there was that, and there was also, I wanted to make the point is that women's experience is really important,
mm,
and we don't hear enough of women's lived experience in our national conversation. It doesn't inform enough of our policy and of the way we live. So one of the things that I also wanted to say to women, which I hope I do say in the book, is that it's very important as we get older that number one, you recognize that your experience is really valuable and is really important. And number two, that you find your voice in order to share that and not be shy about doing that, because that is really, really important. And so that was really why I discovered after after I published the book, I discovered that what I had done inadvertently was what's actually called a life audit, um, which is a very helpful thing to do. So in looking back at the decades of my life, my adult life, and trying to pick out the things that I thought were formative for me, I started to understand a lot about myself. In that I've had no, unlike yourself, I've had no training in any of this, but this just kind of, it was a revelation because I suddenly realized when you look at things like, for example, I became pregnant at 25 as the result of a holiday romance. Wasn't really a romance. But anyway, I felt myself pregnant as a single woman when I was 25 in an Ireland that was a very cold place for single mothers or unmarried mothers, as we were called then. Now, I had the support of my family, but society was very judgmental and cold in general. So when I look back, I mean, I had always taken that, like people who knew me knew that, my daughter is now 36. I have two grandchildren, but it was only when I look back, I thought, geez, that was tough. Like that
Mhm.
was actually tough. And I
Yeah.
think women, all of us have been through tough things, whether it's that or it's something else. And I think we don't give ourselves credit very often. We don't look back and go, do you know what? I did that and I survived that, which means, it means that in the end, when you do a kind of a life audit, and it's something I encourage people to do in the book, I give questions at the end of each decade to kind of ask yourself, um, and at the end of it, you'll discover that Winnie the Pooh was right all along when he said, what did he say? He said, we are braver than we think, and we are stronger than we believe, and we are smarter also than we think. And I think that was what I learned. And I think for women of my age in particular, because it's changed now, like all my kids went to college. When I was leaving school, you didn't go to college. You finished your secondary education and you went out to work. And I think sometimes that puts us on older women on the back foot nowadays. We kind of think, oh, well, I didn't go to college, so I'm not that smart. But in actual fact, the very title of the book is Wise Up, because wisdom comes not from books, not from studying. It comes purely and only, I believe, from life experience. So I wanted to shine a light on the fact that all of our life's experience, regardless of what that was, is valuable, not just to ourselves as people, but to the people around us and to society in a wider kind of context.
Wonderful. Amazing. So I'm curious, when did you become a writer broadcaster? And I'm also curious about your pregnancy at 25, because that is, as you say, it's no easy task. I'm a single parent myself, but I'm 44.
Yeah.
So, but I still know the judgment still to this day that exists
Yeah.
from being a solo parent. So, I can imagine at 25, yeah, there's a lot more
Yeah.
wisdom at 44. My son's nearly 9 now, and so I was 36 when I had him. But when I reflect on my decades, when I was 25, my goodness, there was a world of difference between the 25-year-old and the 36-year-old.
Yeah.
What happened in your 20s? Were you in writing and broadcasting then, or?
No, no, I'm in now my fifth career
Okay.
to date. So when I left school, growing up in the 60s, actually, like most girls who grew up, certainly around here, there was only one thing any of us wanted to be. If you grew up in the 60s and early 70s, and that was an air hostess. I desperately wanted to work for Aer Lingus and I wanted to be an air hostess. I mean, Aer Lingus was the only kind of glamorous kind of thing that we had in Ireland at all. Anyway, I halfway through my secondary school, I realized that I was far too tall to be a hostess because they had an upper height limit of 5'6", and I was cruising towards my current height of 6 foot. So I was well outside of that. So that dream died. Anyway, to cut a very long story short, I ended up leaving school and starting a secretarial course, kind of resigned myself to the fact that I was going to be somewhere in a typing pool. But then another ad appeared in the paper for a company called JWT, a holiday company, and I went to work for them. So I worked in the travel business for about my first career, which lasted around about 9 years or so, 8 years, and ended more or less when I found myself pregnant because although I had the support of my family and I lived at home, so I was lucky in that respect. Working in travel wasn't 9 to 5, it wasn't well paid, and also I couldn't avail of the perks any longer, because as you know, once you become a single parent, you kind of move into that space where you're not married, but you're not really free and easy and single either. So you're kind of in this funny space. So I left the travel business at that point and went into my second career. But yeah, as you say, Ireland was a cold place. This was only a couple of years after Anne Lovett died in a graveyard in Longford, having given birth to her baby in a cold winter's day. This was again a few years after the Kerry Baby Tribunal. There was huge judgment of single mothers. There was, I mean, and this was one of the things that I didn't realize until I wrote about it in the book, that I spent all of my pregnancy and probably the first maybe 10 years of my daughter's life listening to conversations on the media here, very often, on the Late Late Show or on the radio, where panels, usually of men,
Yeah.
discussed the scourge of these unmarried mothers who were getting pregnant purely to get a house from the government. Um, that was number one. And number two, they were all going to have children who would turn out to be delinquent because they were being raised without a father figure. Um, and although my logical mind could go, that's bullshit, like that's just nonsense.
Yeah.
You when you keep hearing conversations like that, they do go in somewhere. And I had a very big moment at my daughter's 21st, by which stage I had got married, I had two more children. Um, and I was whatever age I was, and I was standing watching her at her 21st, dancing with her friends, and I suddenly had this huge light bulb moment where I went, she's not a delinquent. She's
Yeah.
actually grand. She's exactly the same as all her other mates. And
Yeah.
I started to get angry. And I think I had a lot of that anger for a lot of years at that kind of judgment. I
Yeah.
tell a story actually in the book about when I was at home. My father was a very conservative man. He was a civil servant. Now he was a lovely man, but he was a very conservative man. It took him a little while to come to terms with the fact that his only daughter was pregnant and not married, and not even in a relationship. But he did. He came to terms with it, and he was fine. But I was on maternity leave from work, and I was at home having given birth, and the phone rang. And again, this was in the days before mobile phones, so it was the phone in the hall. Picked it up. It was a call from my father from a colleague of his who was a man at the very top of the civil service in Ireland. He would have had a degree of public profile. And I answered the phone, and he asked for my dad, and I said, fine. So I could only hear one side of the conversation, right? But
Mhm.
he obviously thought I was my mother. And my father said, oh, no, 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 that was Barbara. And then his next thing was, oh, no, no, she is working. Yeah, she's just, and I could feel my father getting into a bit of a heap. And he said, oh, no, no, she's just, well, she's on maternity leave. And then the next thing he said was, no, 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 she didn't get married. And the next thing he said was, yes, she does know who the father is. Because in Ireland, if you were a single mother, you clearly were slut who was, sleeping with all and sundry who passed by your front door. And that was just the way it was. So I think I carried a lot of anger about that for a long time, which I think I have now parked and dealt with and got rid of. But I have huge respect for anybody, as you say, even today. A lot of that judgment that was very overt back in the 80s has gone underground, but it is still there. And I think anybody who is parenting alone, be they male or female, deserves huge support and huge credit because it is not easy. You are doing a two-person job on your own, and it can be lonely as well. So I have huge respect for anybody who finds themselves in that situation and who makes that choice to do that.
I guess what we're really touching on here is patriarchy.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and also that still very much exists in our society.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Misogynistic views are very much present in our society. Not just here in Ireland, north and south,
Yeah.
but further afield if we look at what's happening in the rest of the world as well.
Yes.
And I know we had a brief conversation before we started, but a huge part of trauma work is not just about the individual, but it's about the collective, and it's
Yeah.
about how our society and how the systems in our society support or cause harm to individuals. And um like that's so harmful,
Yeah.
so harmful, that all this blame is placed on the woman and the young girls, but there's not a second thought
No,
for the men or the boys at
the great
all.
lads. The great lads.
Ah, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, they don't suffer any consequences whatsoever. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I have three daughters now, and it's one of the things that I am very conscious about. I mean, they're all adults now, but in making them realize that we do live in a patriarchy. And
Mm-hmm.
in order for us, and as you say, it goes to the big questions, from climate change to what's happening in Gaza to what's
Yeah.
happening in Ukraine. That is all product of a patriarchal kind of system. So the answer, I mean, part of the answer is ensuring we elect more women, we vote more women into the positions of power, we make sure that boards are gender balanced, we make sure councils are gender balanced. But that's not enough. We actually need a new system. We need a matriarchal rather than a patriarchal system. The patriarchal system, which is all built around assertiveness and aggression and power and all of that stuff, is what has caused all of the damage that we see all around us. And we need to change that system into something that is more about community, is more about a circular way of doing things rather than a hierarchy. And that is where I think hope for the world lies. And I mean, somebody one older woman who totally embodies that is Mary Robinson, our former president here, who has been speaking a lot in the last 48 hours about America's stance on Gaza. And she is the kind of older woman matriarch, powerful matriarch, who's not afraid to speak truth to power, that I think we need more of. And she is a shining light at the moment. And we need more of that. And again, that comes back to, I believe that there is a huge untapped resource with older women
Yeah.
who are largely silenced because society tells us that as we get older, we become invisible, which is absolute bullshit. And it also keeps telling us the main message you hear as a woman who gets older is you should be fighting aging. And
Okay.
you're like,
Yeah.
hello. And
Mm-hmm.
this is all designed to keep older women who are at the stage of their lives when you're parenting, your hands on is done. You're still, if you're lucky, you're still healthy and energetic and creative and all of those good things. But you now also have the freedom to pursue that and to do stuff that perhaps you didn't want to do. And what society tells us is let's keep all these women distracted by getting them to look at their faces and look at what's happening to their faces and worry about that. And as well as just making a whole lot of money out of us, it's also keeping us distracted, keeping us focused in instead of doing what we should be doing, which is what Mary Robinson is doing. Now, we all can't be Mary Robinsons, but we can all do it in our own small way, within our own families, within our own communities. And that is calling out stuff that is wrong and that needs to be fixed, just like she has done.
Yeah, I was actually at Stormont twice before the holidays, twice in November actually, at an event about developing women in our community. And there was some really powerful older women there that have been instrumental in the peace process here
Yes.
in Northern Ireland, because if you think about the peace process, most people go to men that were involved in
Yes.
the peace process, but women were instrumental in making that happen.
And they were instrumental at a community level, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And of course,
Um,
Mo Mowlam has been largely
oh,
forgotten, which drives me insane. As
yeah.
somebody who remembers clearly what went on at the time, she was to the forefront of all of those
And,
negotiations.
and the abuse that that woman
Yeah,
endured was horrendous,
horrendous,
horrendous.
horrendous.
So part of these events was looking back on history in Northern Ireland, and then, I suppose noticing how far we have come, but also noticing how far we still have to
Oh,
go.
yeah,
And there was some archive video footage of women in Northern Ireland, just ordinary women, doing extraordinary things.
yeah,
Um, and a couple of things, I'll just touch on them because
yeah.
what you're talking about has reminded me of it. So there was a woman called Mrs. Beatty. They didn't call her by her first name. She was interviewed and she was called Mrs. Beatty. And then that sparked a conversation at the conference about how when women went in to birth their babies, they weren't called by their first name. They were called like Mrs. Beatty or Mrs. McAleese. And one of the speakers, Monica, she was like, she didn't take her husband's name. And she says, no, I want to be called Monica. Call me Monica. That's my name.
Yeah,
And just even really that to me is really significant
you're so right.
how things, yes, have evolved, but there is a huge way still to go. Huge.
There is, and mentioning that about names can seem to be kind of almost trivial, but it's not.
Yeah.
And it's one of the things I've written about in the book, and it's one of the things that comes up in houses, I'm sure, all over the country, north and south, at this time of year, when you get your Christmas cards and they are addressed to Mr. and Mr. husband's first name and last name, so
Yeah.
that you are erased completely out of the picture. I didn't take my husband's name either. And I still have, even within my own family, I still have people who send me cards and insist on directing them to Paul and Barbara Sherwood. And I am not Barbara Sherwood. But as I say, I still also get cards addressed to Mr. and Mrs. Paul Sherwood. And that might seem to be a small thing, but it's not. It's another way. And it's like when I talked about the conversations that I used to listen to when I was an unmarried mother. And that even though rationally I could go, it's not important, that's nonsense. I can refuse to accept that. At some level, that goes in. And it's this subtle undermining of women
Yes.
at those kind of levels can actually be really damaging. It's the same, I'm always amazed at the amount of times you go to fill in a form as a woman and it asks you for your title. And usually the list is Mr., Mrs., Miss, MISS, and then Ms. Men are just Mr. Their marital status is of no relevance whatsoever to anything. Our marital status, it has to be identified all the time. And I object to that. If you are identifying as a woman, then you're Miss. If you're identifying as a man, then you're Mr. Or you can choose to be them or there or whatever. But this like Mrs. or Miss is just, it does my actual head in. I remember years ago going down to Specsavers to get glasses for the first time here in Dunleary, and this poor guy who was filling in the form as I was a new client, and he said, "And what's your name?" And I said, "Barbara Scully." "Yeah, and is that Mrs. or Miss or what?" And I looked at him and I was like, "What's that got to do with anything?" And he was like, "What?" And I said, "What has that got to do with anything?" And he was completely like, "I don't compute. I don't understand the question." And I go, "You're asking me my marital status? That's got nothing to do with my eyesight. I'm a woman. You can put that down wherever you want to put it down. But I refuse to give you my title." And I mean, as you're doing this, you can feel people behind you going, "Oh my God." And of course, the latest, I mean, I write in the book as well about the stereotypes that women get hurled at them anytime you raise your voice or you want to call something
Mm,
out. And the latest one, which is very effective anytime you want to make a point or a complaint or raise your voice, is that you're a Karen. Oh my,
oh,
you're
you're
a
a Karen.
Karen. Yeah, you're such a
Uh,
Karen. Yeah. Oh my God, you're just such a Karen. I mean, there's no male equivalent for that. But it's purely a way of making women feel who want to, object to something or raise their voice about something or raise a point that's uncomfortable. And it's another way of just shutting you down and making you feel like you're being an idiot.
Yeah, so true. And I'm just thinking one of the other pieces of footage was of, and now I can't remember her name, the lady's name, but she had won the Nobel Peace Prize for work that she'd done in Northern Ireland. And as her speech, which by the way was spoken from the heart, she had no notes or anything, and her
Wow.
speech was just fabulous. Um, I feel bad now, I can't remember her name. But the broadcaster, when he was talking about her, he referred to her as a wee girl from Belfast. A wee girl from Belfast. And
All of those, yeah,
that's a woman in her 30s that has just won a Nobel Peace
a
Prize,
Nobel Peace Prize.
and
Yeah,
a wee girl from Belfast.
yeah. It's
So,
unreal. And it's all subtle undermining.
but so words do matter.
They do
Words
matter.
do matter, and language really matters.
It
And I
does.
think that's important to try and get that right. Is
And also, I think for women, you've got to realize that even if you don't have you're not on the media, or you don't have a profile, you can still make a difference. It's taken me years to train my husband out of saying things like, he was out at a job and the girl on reception. And I'd go, are they employing children now? And he's like, what? And I go, was she a woman or was she a girl? Oh, she was the lady. I said, why can't you say woman? I find it's, a lot of men in particular have a difficulty with saying the actual word woman, which has a lot more strength attached to it
mhm,
than referring to a grown woman as a girl. Now, that's not to say, I mean, I will say if I'm going out with my girlfriends, me and the girls are going out, but it depends on the context. But if you're in a business situation and you're going to talk about the girl from marketing or the girl on reception, that's highly inappropriate and it's wrong.
certainly, you certainly wouldn't say it about a man. You wouldn't
Say the
say, "Oh,
boy.
the boy from marketing."
No,
What, a child?
exactly. But those kind of little things do matter.
They do. They do. So I'm assuming we're talking about the latter part of your book, the part two now. It touches on all
Oh,
of this, does it? Yeah.
yeah, I mean it does. You know, there once I did the kind of the life audit bit, there were then certain things that I really wanted, certain points that I really wanted to make. Sorry, if there's noise in the background, my dog has started to snore. So just when you're listening back to this and you're going, what's that noise? It's the dog snoring.
Don't worry. It's
Your dog
fine.
isn't.
My wee pup is lying here dozing away. She's
And
happy.
she's quiet as a mouse.
Like she is as good as gold.
Oh,
So,
that's good. Well, my fella's snoring like a train here behind me. But yeah, there was a couple of points specifically that I wanted to make
mm,
relating to women getting older.
yeah.
So for example, one of the first ones was talking about our health, minding your health as you get older. And that stems from my own experience of developing diabetes in my mid 50s, type 2 diabetes, which is the diabetes you give yourself by being by being fat and lazy for too long, which is what I was. So I had a big wake up call where I had to take control of my health. And I talk about it in the book. I mean, I made an absolute virtue out of being a couch potato. I was all about body positivity, but I kind of didn't realize that body positivity is one thing, but being fit is something completely else.
Mm,
And I wasn't fit. And so I had to take control of my health. So that is one thing that I talk quite a lot about because again, it's something that I think a lot of women struggle with. And again, the narrative, which is encouraged by programs and by products that are all about diet and losing weight, um, and that just drives me insane because what I had to find, I mean, I had to lose weight. I had to cut out sugar. I had to totally change, but it was a lifestyle change that I need to live with for the rest of my life. It wasn't Barbara was going on a diet in order to lose a certain amount of weight. Because if you go on a diet, as soon as you come off the diet, your weight starts to go back on again. So that to me was very important to make that point and to also make the point that like everything else, but particularly about your health, it's very often like people often think, oh, it's too late now. But our bodies react very positively once you start looking after them. So that was one of the points I wanted to make. I also wanted to make the point about, and this is why my book is not just, I don't think, for older women. It's also younger women, I think, would get quite a lot out of it, because another point I make is that I wanted to flag to younger women the fact that these, what I call the postmenopausal years, are delicious,
Mm.
um, because because of all the freedoms that you have, which again I didn't anticipate until I sat down and started to go, this is amazing. Like, for the first time, once you're post menopause, for the first time since you were what, 12 or 13, you are completely free of your biology. That's huge for women, because from the time you're 12 or 13, you're dealing with all the logistical and the physical and the, stuff around periods. Then you're dealing with the trying not to get pregnant. Then you're dealing with the maybe trying to get pregnant. Then you're being pregnant and you're having kids. And then you have the menopause. So, like, for decades, you're dealing with all this stuff, and suddenly it all just falls away. And that's amazing. We should be throwing menopause parties, once we're through it, because it's like, yay, this is brilliant. So there's that. There's the freedom of, from, if you're a parent, your kids. Now, I've still got two at home. And I mean, I don't know how that could be going on for quite a while yet, but they don't need me. They don't need me here 24/7. I can come and go as I please. I do not, if I'm here and I'm cooking dinner, that's grand, but they don't expect me to provide dinner every night or any other kind of service that, they would have had when they were younger. So that's great. That's a freedom. You might have a little bit more financial freedom as you get older. You have the freedom from worrying about other people's opinions. And that is huge. And I started to notice that when I turned 40, that I was starting to care less about looking
Mhm.
for other people's approval. And
Yeah.
again, it's something as women we're taught to seek from a very early age. And
Okay.
it very often revolves around how we look. And that's why, go back to what you said, what we say and how we talk to people is really important. And with girls, very often, you grow up learning, oh, you're so pretty, oh, you look so gorgeous, that this becomes one of the main features of our lives, is that no matter what we do, we'd better look great doing it, because it'll be worth more if we do. So suddenly you start to realize I'm not that bothered anymore about other people's opinions about what I do. And certainly when I turn 60, I honestly don't care anymore. I care about what I think, about what I'm doing, about what I'm saying, about how I look, but I don't care. I'm not seeking anybody else's approval for any of that. That's great. You have the freedom from the fear of failure. Because again, when you do a life audit and you look back, you'll have realized that you failed a number of times along the way, like sometimes spectacularly, but you didn't die. You're still here. So now that makes you courageous, because you think, yeah, I'll take a chance. And if it works, it works. And if it doesn't work, I'll pick myself up and I'll move on. And then you also have in the background what I call the doomsday clock. So you're aware of the fact, like I consider now I'm in my third age, your first age being from 1 to 30, your second age being from 30 to 60. So 60 plus is your third age. And I'm aware that, the road is not going to keep going forever. So if there's something I want to do, and I've always wanted to do, now is the time to do it. For me, one of the first things was I want to write a book. Now is the time to do it. And so it gives you the kind of the motivation to do things. So I wanted to draw attention to all of that. I also wanted to go back to what I said to you earlier, to help women to discover their own voices,
Yeah.
and to share their experience, their opinions. All of it matters. And it matters because you have the experience, that your opinions, your stories have come from a lived experience, which we need to hear more of. And that goes right back to talking about how we live in a patriarchy where very often women's experience isn't valued. And I'm not talking just about your professional experience. Many women I know and of my age gave up work to be at home with their children. That is still important. That is still stories we need to hear. So there was finding your voice. There was, oh yes, talking, but that's what I was going to say, talking to younger women about the fact that, start thinking early what you want to do with these years. Don't suddenly find yourself, 60 plus going, what am I going to do? Because the hard yards are the years when your children are young, when your mortgage is high, when you're working hard, you're paying your bills. Yeah, and science proves that life is like a smile, and your happiness is at its lowest point when you're in your middle years, your 30s and your 40s, and life is tough and it's hard. But know that it'll start to turn around and the freedoms will start to come back, and start thinking about what it is you want to do, because you will, if you're lucky and you mind your health, you will have the opportunity to do all of that. um so that's something that I think it's never too early to start dreaming about what it is that you want to do, knowing that you will have the opportunity to pursue those dreams when you get to your 60s and hopefully into your 70s as well.
So you wrote Wise Up when you were what age are you? Do you mind me asking, sorry?
I will be 62 next month.
62. Wow, fantastic.
So
Uh,
I wrote Wise Up during COVID, basically. I mean, a lot of the themes were stuff I'd written about. I've been a writer for about the last 12 years. Um, Again, a reinvention after I spent 10 years at home with my kids when they were younger. So about 10 or 12 years ago, and I started doing freelancing work for the newspapers and contributing to radio. And a lot of the stuff that's in the book are things that I would have written about in the past anyway. So it was just a pulling all of those together. So yeah, so the book was published last year. And it is still available on Amazon, and it's also available on my own website, which is barbarascully.com. And it's not an academic tome. I didn't go to college, as I mentioned already. This is coming from my own experience. It is, I hope, a light and entertaining read. But yeah, so I wrote it last year. Yeah, I published it last year.
Amazing, amazing. And do you think, you know, the way when people write books, they say, "Oh, you know, this book was in me for years before I actually put pen to paper." And you know the way they say, "Oh, there's a book inside of everyone." So
Yeah.
did you have that same calling, or was this more?
Well, I guess I've always written, insofar as that, like I said, I reinvented myself as a writer about 10 or 12 years ago. But I've always written because, even when I was at home with the kids, I was editing our local parish newsletter and I was writing stuff for it. Before that, I worked for a national charity and I was their PRO. So I was writing press releases, I was writing copy for, brochures and leaflets and all the rest of it. So writing has always been something that has interested me, and it's always been something I've done. I'm a voracious reader. So I always, again, it was one of the dreams. We all have dreams. I don't know if we all have a book in us, but I think all of us are creative in one way or another. And I think for some people, that's, yes, I'd like to write. For other people, that's, I'd like to paint, or I'd like to learn how to cook or bake or do my garden or whatever it is. I think creativity is a hugely important aspect of the human condition.
Mhm.
And I think that, our education system doesn't nurture creativity in the way that it should. In actual fact, it very often kills it. So it can be difficult for people to find where that creative streak is within them. But I think we all have it. And I think most of us have, at one level or another, an urge at some stage to maybe find it. For me, it was always writing. So yes, I always wanted to write a book. And because I'd been writing for about the last 10 years, I thought, sure, how hard can it be? I always thought, sure, when I have the time now, I'll write the book. And then COVID happened and a lot of my work fell away. And I thought, okay, now here's the opportunity. If you're going to write the book, write the goddamn book. It was way harder. I thought, sure, it'll be easy. I've been writing for years. Sure, how hard could it be? It's just like doing a whole load of articles. It wasn't. It was much harder than I ever anticipated, and took me a lot. And I made every mistake along the way doing it. But anyway, we finally got there, and I'm delighted. And I'm now nearly finished a novel, which
Oh,
I haven't got a publisher yet, but hopefully I'll be getting that out hopefully early enough in the new year. And then I'm also hoping to do a one-woman show off the back of Wise Up, and some of the themes that I talk about in there as well, because I'm really on a mission to try and, wise up older women to their own power, because I
mhm.
think we have an innate power as matriarchs that is smothered by society, because we can be terribly troublesome. Mary Robinson, Mary Macaulay, Vandana Shiva, there's a whole load of women. Because once you realize that you don't actually give a hoot what people think, that does make you extremely powerful, especially as a woman, because we're conditioned for so long to actually look for people's approval. And I think once you kind of go, do you know what, I don't care anymore. I'm just going to speak my truth. I'm going to say whatever it is that I want to say without, I mean, obviously without hurting anybody or without inciting hatred, but in a normal way. I think that's very important. And I mean, the other thing which I write about in the book and which I'm hugely passionate about is the need to counter the anti-aging industry that has been built around older women, which is a complete construct of the cosmetic industry, which is a physical impossibility, and which is relieving women at a time when, as I say, they should be stepping into their own power. It's not only just relieving them of their hard earned money, because a lot of these things cost a fortune, but it's also relieving them of their self-confidence
Yeah.
because they feel, oh, I can't stand up, I can't, go on television, I can't have my photograph taken because look, I look shocking, um I think that one of the most damaging things you can do as a woman as you get older is to keep your focus inward, because as you age you will change, your body will change, your face will change, your hair will change, and the sooner you come to terms with that, I believe, and accept that, and actually look outward at all the great things you could be doing with this precious time in your life, I think that is really important. That's not to say, because I think women are always judged no matter what we do. And
Yeah.
that's not to say that I am judging any woman who does choose to have Botox or whatever else they're doing in order to make themselves look different. That's your choice. And if you want to do that, fine. But what I do want to say to women is you have a choice. You don't have to. So don't knock yourself, twist yourself up into knots doing stuff that I believe essentially is a losing game, because eventually you're going to catch up with yourself and you're not any younger than your age is.
Yeah.
No matter what way you look. Do you know what I mean? It doesn't make you not being 61. You're still going to be 61.
Yeah.
So I just really wanted to say that strongly to women, that you are absolutely enough and you are good enough as you are, and stand up and claim that. And one of the great things about COVID is that before COVID, women with grey hair were generally in their 80s, whereas now you're seeing women in their 50s and 60s rocking, as I call it, silver hair, which I think is great, because it just again is that, to me, is about, we talk so much about diversity. And that, to me, is the bottom line with diversity: is everybody do whatever it is that suits you, but don't feel you have to slavishly follow down any particular path, particularly in relation to how you look. Do whatever feels right and good for you.
But I think that's why we need to kind of combat the message of the beauty industry, which kind of preys on our insecurities and preys on
Yes.
our feeling that we're not good enough. Like we
Yeah.
need to buy this potion, or we need to get this piece of cosmetic work done because there's something
Wrong.
wrong with us, that we look wrong,
Yeah.
we have to fix ourselves in some way. And for me, when I look at society and culture, there's not enough real life women
Mm.
holding a mirror up in our society of what it actually looks like to be in your
Yeah.
40s,
Yeah.
50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and be real with it. And be,
Exactly.
and that's not to say that there's days that you go, oh Jesus, there's another wrinkle. Oh man. It's, let's be real about it. Aging can be challenging when our faces change and our hair changes and our body shape changes.
Yeah.
But the thing that I keep reminding myself of is even our self-esteem fluctuates. So there's
Yeah.
days that our self-esteem will be high and we feel good about ourselves, and then there's days that we might not. And I suppose the days that we don't is just to really remind ourselves that we're not alone in this world,
Exactly.
that there's other people going through exactly what we're going through, and that it's okay. It's okay.
But the more we see of women being real,
Mhm.
of saying, this is me, this
Yeah,
is real, the easier it is then for us to accept ourselves when we get there.
absolutely.
So I think that's why it's hugely important that women, that's the dog snoring again. That's why I think it's hugely important, particularly for women with a degree of profile, to look like themselves. And sometimes when I share some of this stuff on social media, I get people coming back and saying, "Oh, but I love makeup and I love the hairdresser." Yeah, like I'm not saying you have to look like a bag lady. Absolutely. Look, be happy as much as you can be with how you look, but don't become over focused on it. I mean, I use makeup, I wash my hair, I go to the hairdresser.
Yeah.
Um, but as long as I'm happy with how I'm presented, and I try not to become completely obsessed about it. And I think that society and consumerism and the cosmetic industry want us to become obsessed, because if we're obsessed with all the things that we think that need fixing, we're going to spend more money and they're going to make more profit. So I think the more of us that stand up and go, do you know what, this is as good as I get at the minute, this is as good as I'm looking at the minute, well, then that's fine. And I applaud, like, there are, as we know, who's your woman who used to be in Pamela Anderson at the moment, and
Yes,
she's showing up at
amazing.
things with no makeup. And that's great because it's normalizing it.
Yeah.
It's moving our eye and our brain away from seeing these horrendously photoshopped women. I mean, I know women in the media in Ireland, and they turn up on the cover of a magazine and they look amazing, but they don't look like that in real life. They've been photoshopped to death. And that annoys me because it's dishonest. And it's the more women that say, "This is me, this is how I look," the easier it is for other women to make that choice. And it is your choice. Do whatever it is that you want to do. But I think the visibility of older women being themselves is hugely important.
But you know the other thing that just came to mind as we're talking about it, and also I think the pressure is not just women getting older; it's actually younger women as well are feeling
Yeah.
pressure to look even younger. It's like, oh my God. So when I think about it, I'm like, again, it comes back to patriarchy. What are we here? What are we here to do? We're not
Yeah.
here to look pretty.
No,
you know
no, we're
but if
not
you think about
decorations.
but if you think about it, it's very it's nearly like we're an object.
Yeah.
um, but when we take all of our energy and our focus to how we look rather than how we feel on the inside and what we're contributing to the world, it
Yeah.
takes us away from all this good stuff. It takes us
Mm,
away from being in our power, our agency,
yeah.
our creativity,
Yeah.
our hobbies, our interests. When we're so fixated on how we actually look,
It devalues us. It completely
completely,
devalues us. And
completely,
I think, if you listen, as I have done with my kids growing up, and I remember doing it myself, if you listen to young girls, like from the time they're maybe 10 or 11 up, they will learn to decide about their own bodies. They see themselves as the sum of their parts rather than as a whole. So, you'll often hear young teenage girls saying, "Oh yeah, no, I like my hair, but I don't like my nose. Or no, I've awful legs. Or, I like this bit, but I don't like the other bit." You'd never hear boys saying that. Never. Now, increasingly, I think this is going to start to affect boys as well, and you can see that starting to happen now. But I think that for literally forever, girls have been brought up to constantly judge themselves on how their appearance is and how they're looking, and that their value is intrinsically linked to that. And as I say, that is a fool's game, and it will catch up on you as you get older, because then you'll have that kind of sexist bullshit added on to that. Then you'll have the ageist bullshit that only affects women, so that men as they get older are seen to be they're seen to gain gravitas. They
yeah.
become silver foxes, they become elder statesmen. Women become witches. They become, and I say that, and I like witches, but women, society will refer to as the old witch, not in a complimentary sense.
Yeah.
She's let herself go. Oh God,
Um,
what happened to her? Or even the kind of backhanded compliment that some people think, God, doesn't she look great for her age? That's
yes.
not a compliment.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
is again a judgment on a woman getting older. And it's a judgment that men don't have to deal with at all. And as I say, the sooner we as women refuse to accept that kind of bullshit, the better it'll be for our society. And it is really, really important. I mean, I know so many women, and because I've been doing events for them since the book came out, who'll come up to me afterwards and say, oh, I wish I had your confidence. I wish I felt as confident as you. And confidence, can be difficult as you get older. You have to make a really conscious effort to find that. And so it's easier for some than others. But I think the more of us that are out there saying, this is what it looks like to be 61 or 62 or 65 or 70 or whatever, the easier it is for all women then to accept themselves as being okay.
Mhm. Yeah, you mentioned earlier on about finding our voice and
Yeah.
kind of sharing our thoughts and being more vocal. And I'm wondering, does that go hand in hand with postmenopause because of the change in hormones, because of the drop in estrogen? We care less about what other people think, so we naturally will just say what we want to say and just not worry about what other people think. Do you think there's a link there?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that there is a link there. I think that, and again, I'm talking from my experience and the experience of a lot of women of my generation who may have taken time out to have been at home with their children, may have stepped back from their career. And that is, I think, singly the biggest thing you can do to dent your confidence because society doesn't value that. And again, we're coming right back to the fact that we live in a patriarchy. The kind of stuff that women still tend to do, whether you're working or not, which is the caring stuff, the nurturing stuff, the house stuff, the home stuff, is not valued. We put no value as a society on caring, not just no value on parents, be they men or women, but it's usually women who decide to or who have the privilege of being able to maybe be at home while their children are young. But if you look at the again, mainly women who work in the care industries, in nursing homes, in creches and daycare, they are amongst the most poorly paid in society. The reason for that is that we put no value on the work that they are doing. And if you're a parent or a daughter with an elderly parent who's in a care home or a nursing home, you'll know just how valuable that work is. But society puts no value on it. And I think that that is the single biggest thing that makes women, that robs women of their confidence, is that they feel that what a large part of what they're doing has actually no intrinsic value. And until we change that, until society says, you know what, caring is actually much more valuable. And I kind of hoped that that was maybe going to be something that came out of COVID, because I think that was when we had a very
Mm,
bright spotlight
mhm,
shone on the
mhm,
kind of things in society that we cannot function without. Care was one of them. People who work in the services that we all require every day was another one. Again, very poorly paid and who had to continue working during COVID, who didn't have the luxury of being able to work from home. And I was hoping maybe that would change our mindset. But it hasn't. And again, it comes back to having more women in power in order to make these changes. But I think that can be one of the biggest things that robs women of the confidence and the ability to find their own voices. And I think also it makes women feel that their life experience isn't as valuable as it actually is, because society doesn't put any value on it. I do think, and I hadn't made the link with estrogen, but I do think obviously as you get older, it is easier not to care as much about what people think. But I do think also that until somebody calls things out to you very often, you just continue along the way you've always done it. And I think that that is a problem. Like, for example, when I spent the 10 years at home with my children, which I hadn't intended to do, but just life got in the way, and I was taking a year out, which turned into 10 years. And it was a wonderful privilege. And they were very happy years. And I look back at them very fondly. But I remember during those years and in the immediate aftermath, when I started to try and reinvent myself as a freelancer, but I wasn't getting a lot of work. I would be, if you were out in a social situation and somebody said to you, "And what do you do, Barbara?" And I remember having a panic attack and
yeah.
hating that question, because when I was at home, there was no word to describe what I did. I'm not a housewife. I didn't marry a house. I mean, what am I? There isn't even a title for it, let alone any kind of financial remuneration for it.
Mhm.
Um, and you could see people's eyes glaze over. And 9 times out of 10, and I guarantee this will be with any woman who is at home with her kids, she'll go, "Oh, I'm just at home with the kids. Like that's just what I do." Even though
In a
That
nice,
is the hardest job that
totally.
you can do, and it's 24/7, and it doesn't have coffee breaks, and it doesn't have lunch breaks, and it's multitasking all the time. But we don't value it because society doesn't value it. So again, finding your voice, part of that is recognizing the fact that what you did in those years is just as important, if not more important, than another woman who perhaps sits on the board of a big bank, or whatever. It is just as important. And I just wish that we could give women the confidence to recognize that and to be able to say, yeah, I was at home with my kids. It was great. And I did a great job. And if you ask women who are at home, very often they're involved in things in their local community. They're the women, and I'm saying women because the majority of them are women. I know there are some men, and it shouldn't be just women. It shouldn't matter. But these are the people who are involved usually in the local schools, supporting the sports days and the coffees at various things that go on in the school and all that kind of stuff. So they are providing huge, important service, but they don't recognize it because society doesn't recognize it.
No. There's a statistic that's coming to mind from the book Invisible Women.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, it's an incredible book, but it's huge. It's very, very big, but it's incredible. And in that book, she refers to research, and the research states that 75% of the world's unpaid jobs are done by women. 75%.
Wow.
So that's caring for children,
Yeah.
that's caring for children, but that's also caring for relatives. So sick parents, elderly parents. So that's caring roles.
Yeah.
75% are
Yeah.
carried out by women. And because of that, a lot of women are forced out of employment because of their caring roles, or they have to go into part-time positions so that they can balance all of the jobs and all of the roles that they have to do. And then we know that part-time positions don't have the same opportunities as full-time positions. So
Yeah.
again, we're on the back foot
On the
in
back foot.
that. Yeah. So we are invisible, and it's because it's not valued, and
Yeah.
it's yeah, we need to have different conversations around that and know that it is important and
And
that
we also, coming back to finding your voice, we also need, because I think women are very good at having these conversations in safe spaces, which very often means with other women.
yes.
That we can articulate all of this comfortably if we're in what we would consider to be a safe space. And usually that means with other women. We need to take these conversations to where the men are.
Yes.
Because until men buy into this,
Mhm.
and say, yes, actually, this work should be valued, these roles should be valued, we need to change this. Until we have a buy in from men, it's almost impossible to effect change.
Mhm.
So we need to get used to saying this to the lads as well, and we need more men to be feminists, and to be active in their feminism, not passively just saying, oh yeah, I'm a feminist because I have a daughter or a married woman or whatever. We need men to actively become active feminists and to actively seek to change things as well.
Mhm. I agree. I agree. And I think one place that that can start is policy and politics
Yeah.
and getting involved. But I know that's really difficult for women because in politics, I don't know about the South, but certainly up here, it's very hard to be a woman in politics.
Yeah, it's the same here.
They do not make it easy at all.
No. No. And the whole system is designed for men who have women at home, who have wives at home. The late sittings of the Dáil here, and the demands that's put on women. Plus, there's a slight safety concern as well. Women get an awful lot of abuse, particularly on social media, if people disagree with their views. But a lot of that can be very personal and can be very violent, can be threatening. So it is very difficult for a woman to go into politics for sure, but we definitely need them.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So I've loved our conversation, by the way.
Oh, so have I. So have I. It's great. Great to
Yeah,
invent
it's
all of
been
this.
great. But I'm just wondering, as we come towards the end of our conversation, is there anything you feel that we've left out or that you'd like to say that you never got an opportunity to say?
The only thing that I would say, which is, kind of taking us off on a slightly different tack, but again, it's something I touch on in the book, and it's a general thing, is that humor is very important.
Ah,
Like a lot of what we've talked about, can be depressing and can be like,
mhm,
oh my God, we're banging our head off a brick wall and blah, 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 blah. Um, and I think particularly at the moment when the world in general is kind of dark,
mhm,
there's so much going on that is deeply troubling and deeply upsetting. But I think that finding, I mean, you at the very beginning, you mentioned animals and the grounding that animals living with animals. I'm a huge believer in that. I am an animal lover. I live with 4 cats and a dog. I have foxes in the garden. I have squirrels and I live in the suburbs, but it's wonderful. And I couldn't live without animals. So, animals, nature, all of that is hugely important. But also so is humor. And my mother used to say, there is very little in life that is meant to be taken that seriously, even the serious stuff.
yeah,
And being able to find the humor and the ridiculous in
mhm,
life is what'll get you through and what'll balance you when you start getting, bogged down
yeah,
in the stories that are coming from your newspapers or from your television or from your news reports. Is, look at your dog, look at your cat, go and read something that's funny, go and listen to a funny podcast, something like that, because humor is hugely important.
mhm,
And we're not here for a long time, but we are here for a good time. So
yeah,
we need to enjoy most of our
yeah,
days in as much as we can.
yeah. Yeah, I love that. And funny that that was one of my messages at Stormont, talking to the women, was about if we want to have a place at the table, and if we want to have our voice heard, and if we want to change policies, and if we want to change our society and our culture, to sustain that, to keep that fight going, because you have to be in a healthy fight stance in your nervous system to find your voice and to say what's right and to stand up for what's right. But to sustain that, we need to pendulate over to the things that fill up our cup, that make us
Yes.
feel really good. Play,
Yes.
nice food, you know,
Yeah.
nature, as you said, play. Like, can you be
Yeah.
playful? You know, what does play look like? Play isn't just for kids. We can play too.
Yeah.
So, yeah, pendulating to play and pleasure is
Have
so.
you um have you read a book by on play by Joanna Fortune?
No, I haven't.
Just
But
look that up. Joanna Fortune is a family therapist and a child psychotherapist here in Dublin. She contributes to media regularly. And she wrote a book about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, called Play as well. I think it's just called Play. And it's about the importance of play, not just for kids, for everybody. And to remain playful in your life, hugely important. And, that doesn't diminish as you get older.
no,
In actual fact,
I think
actually,
I
I
think we get more playful as we get
I
older.
think we do. Yeah, we did. Now, health warning. I started off this year in last January, well, towards the middle of January, with a broken arm, which I broke by falling over a footstool when I was playing chasing with my dog at 61 years of age. So, yeah, just be careful.
Just be careful, yeah.
Be careful with
Mind
the old
yourself.
play there.
Mind yourself whilst you're playing.
Exactly. Watch out for footstools.
Brilliant.
Anyway,
Love it. Barbara, thank you so much.
not at all. It's been a pleasure.
I will put a link in the show notes to
Brilliant.
your book where people can buy it, and also to your socials and any
Brilliant.
other contacts I can pop in there. But
Fabulous.
thank you so much.
Not at all. It's a real pleasure, Michelle, and continued success with your work.
Thank you. Thank you. No doubt we'll keep in touch.
Exactly.
So, thank you for tuning in to this episode of Embody. If you enjoyed this episode, please do like, subscribe, and if you're feeling particularly kind, you could leave a little comment. All of these things really do help with the visibility of the podcast, so I really appreciate it. So, I look forward to tuning in with you all again next week for Embody. Take care and have a great week.